The case of the marriage of Ed Warren and Lorraine Warren. I am telling it in parts so that you can understand it clearly. The Fairfield Haunting. Part 1. In a quiet corner of Lindley Street, Fairfield stood an old, decrepit house. At night, darkness seemed to wrap around it like a heavy, suffocating blanket. From afar, it appeared silent, lifeless, but as one approached, a chilling sensation crawled up the spine, as if unseen eyes were watching. Locals whispered stories. Doors would open by themselves, objects would move, and the temperature inside would suddenly plummet, freezing the very air around you. One night, Ed and Lorraine Warren, renowned paranormal investigators, decided to enter the house. The front door creaked open on its own, as though inviting them in. The moment Lorraine stepped inside, a cold draft ran over her skin, raising goosebumps. She noticed an old framed photograph suddenly. It shook violently and crashed to the floor. Ed took out his instruments to measure energy levels, but the needle swung wildly, spinning in directions it shouldn't. There's something here, something we can't understand, he muttered. As night deepened, the house seemed alive with strange activity. Whispers of a sound like faint breathing echoed through the empty halls. Wooden floorboards trembled as if something heavy had passed over them. In a dark corner, a shadow began to move slowly, deliberately. It had no form, no face, just a dark mass, as though a restless spirit was gliding across the floor. Lorraine tried to scream, but the sound seemed trapped within the walls. They realized that the house wasn't just observing them, it was aware of them. Their presence only seemed to awaken the entity further. As they moved deeper, Ed felt a sudden, icy brush across his arm, something unseen, yet undeniable. Lorraine turned, heart pounding, but saw nothing. Only shadows, and the oppressive silence broken by a sudden, labored exhale that seemed to come from nowhere. Night stretched on, and the terror grew. Ed whispered, "I've never seen anything like this. This presence, it's powerful and deeply frightening, and it's aware of us." And so ends part 1. The house alive with darkness, shadows lurking in every corner, and Ed and Lorraine facing the first unnerving signs of an unseen, malevolent force. Part 2. The night had grown deeper, darker, and the wind outside whispered secrets that only the brave or the foolish dared to hear. Ed and Lorraine moved cautiously through the narrow hallways of the old Lindley Street house, their flashlights cutting through the oppressive blackness. Each step seemed to echo unnaturally, as if the house itself were mimicking their movements. Then it began. From the far corner of the parlor, a low, almost imperceptible creak like the dragging of heavy chains across the wooden floor echoed through the room. Lorraine froze. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. Ed nodded, his jaw tight. The sound repeated, this time closer, but no figure could be seen. The shadows in the corners seemed to swell and ripple, as if alive, watching, waiting. Suddenly, a painting on the wall, a portrait of a stern-looking woman, jerked violently, tilting forward, then snapping back into place as if an invisible hand had pushed it. The air grew icy, so cold that their breath became visible, hanging like small clouds in the dim light. Then came the whispering, soft at first, almost melodic, yet edged with something sinister. Words indistinct, phrases half heard. "Leave, you cannot stay." The sound seemed to circle them, moving from one room to another without ever revealing its source. Lorraine clutched Ed's arm. "This house, it's alive," she said, her voice trembling. Ed tried to calm her, holding up his device that measured spiritual energy. The needle swung violently, spinning in unpredictable directions. "It's not just alive," he murmured. "It's aware of us, watching, testing us." And then the shadows moved. A corner of the room grew darker, a mass of black that did not belong to the dim light. Slowly, it stretched across the floor, creeping toward them like thick smoke. The shadows seemed to pulse with a life of their own, and in the heart of the darkness, a figure began to emerge, a woman, translucent, her features barely human, her eyes hollow and black. She floated just above the floor, her long, tattered gown brushing the boards, yet making no sound. Lorraine gasped. "Ed, she's here." The figure's gaze locked onto them. Ed could feel it, a weight pressing on his chest, as if invisible hands were tightening around his ribcage. The temperature plummeted further, and a fierce wind swirled inside the room, extinguishing their small lanterns. In total darkness, all they could see were the faint glimmers of the ghostly woman, floating closer, her empty eyes staring into their very souls. A sudden crash. The chandelier above rattled violently, showering shards of crystal like deadly rain. The floorboards groaned and cracked under some invisible weight. Lorraine screamed, gripping Ed tightly, her nails digging into his arm. Then came the voice, clear, cold, and filled with rage. "You should not be here. You should not see." The shadow surged forward, reaching toward them with elongated, impossibly thin arms. Ed shouted a protective command, holding up his crucifix. For a moment, the room went still. The wind stilled. The shadows seemed to hesitate, then slowly retreated back into the corners of the room. The ghostly woman's eyes lingered on them, burning into their minds, promising that this was far from over. Shaken, but determined, Ed and Lorraine realized one terrifying truth. This was not a simple haunting. This was a sentient, vengeful force, bound to the house, feeding off fear and testing the courage of any who dared enter. As they retreated to the hallway, trying to gather themselves, every door they passed rattled violently, as though the house itself were mocking their escape. From the darkness, a whisper followed them. "We see you, always watching, never leave." Part 2 ends here. Ed and Lorraine have encountered the first true spirit, but the malevolent presence has only begun to reveal its terrifying power. The shadows are alive, the air is thick with malice, and every step forward could bring them face to face with the full horror lurking in the house. Part 3 By now, Ed and Lorraine Warren had come to understand a chilling truth. This was no ordinary haunting. The house was alive with malevolence, a sentient, vengeful entity that seemed to feed off fear. Every shadow, every whisper, every flicker of candlelight was a warning, test, a trap. The night had deepened into a heavy, suffocating darkness. Outside, wind howled through the skeletal trees, but inside, the atmosphere was worse, thick, electric, as if charged with a presence that hated intrusion. They stepped into the living room, and almost instantly, a series of strange phenomena assaulted them. A chair tipped over violently across the room, its legs scraping the floor like claws. Heavy books fell from the shelves, one after another, each hitting with a deafening thud. The walls themselves seemed to pulse, expanding and contracting subtly, as if breathing. Lorraine's flashlight flickered. In the shadows, she caught movement. 3 figures, almost entirely black, taller than humans, faceless, drifting unnaturally across the room. Their limbs were long and twisted, and they moved silently, yet their presence pressed down like a physical weight. "Ed, we're not alone," she whispered, her voice trembling. Suddenly, the front door slammed shut with a force that shook the walls. The lock clicked into place on its own. They were trapped. From the corner of the room came a sound that made blood run cold. Soft footsteps, but impossible to trace. The sound circled them, closer and closer, until it seemed to echo from inside their own skulls. Then came the whispering again. "Why are you here? You do not belong." Ed raised his crucifix, holding it high, and the shadows recoiled for a moment, but only for a moment. One of the figures lunged, gliding through the air like smoke, and an icy hand brushed against his chest. The chill pierced deep, as if freezing his very heart. Lorraine screamed, and in that instant, the room erupted. Objects flew across the room. Glass shattered, a heavy candlestick flew past Ed's face, and the chandelier wobbled violently above. The shadows multiplied, spinning faster and faster, their forms flickering and merging into grotesque shapes that made no sense, defying every law of nature. Ed shouted commands in a firm, protective voice. Lorraine held a small vial of holy water, sprinkling it in a wide arc. The shadows hissed, retreating briefly, writhing like serpents. But the house was far from done. From upstairs came pounding the unmistakable sound of heavy boots marching, though no one was there. Then, a door upstairs banged open, and a pale, faceless nun appeared at the top of the stairs. Her gown trailed like mist. Her eyes were hollow pits, endless and empty. She pointed down at them, and the temperature dropped so fast that their breaths fogged in front of their faces. Ed called out prayers, his voice shaking but strong. Lorraine's flashlight illuminated the room, and for a split second, the chaos paused. The shadow figures swirled, the ghostly nun faded into the darkness, and an eerie silence descended heavy, almost unbearable. But in that silence, a voice whispered directly into their ears, so close it felt like it came from inside their minds. "You cannot leave. You will see. You will never leave." Heart pounding, sweat dripping, Ed and Lorraine exchanged a look. They knew the house was not just haunted. It was intelligent, it was alive, and it was angry. They had faced only the beginning. The shadows, the flying objects, the ghostly figures. These were tests, warnings. The true horror of the Fairfield house was still waiting, deeper in the darkness, in rooms they had not yet dared enter. Part 3 ends here. Ed and Lorraine have been fully confronted by the house's malicious, sentient presence. The terror is no longer subtle. It is aggressive, violent, and utterly unpredictable. The real nightmare, they know, has only just begun. Part 4. The house had claimed its warning hours ago, but Ed and Lorraine knew there was no turning back. Somewhere upstairs, deeper in the old Lindley Street home, the presence waited. It had tested them once, twice. Now, it was coming for a more personal confrontation. The staircase groaned under their weight, every step echoing like a gunshot in the oppressive silence. The walls seemed to close in, narrowing the hallway as if guiding them towards some dreadful fate. Cold, unnatural drafts whispered past their ears, carrying faint, indistinguishable whispers that sounded almost like children crying but hollow, desperate, pleading. At the top of the stairs, they paused. The long corridor stretched ahead, dimly lit by flickering sconces. Shadows clung to the corners, shifting unnaturally, and then, movement. A tall, thin figure emerged from the far end, faceless, its limbs unnaturally elongated. It floated just above the floor. As it moved closer, the air grew thick with the scent of decay and something metallic, like blood, long, dry. Lorraine instinctively clutched Ed's arm, her nails digging into his sleeve. Suddenly, the first door on their right burst open violently. Papers, books, and debris flew across the hallway like a miniature tornado. From inside, a guttural, inhuman screech ripped through the air. It was not just sound, it was a force that rattled their bones, reverberating deep inside their chests. A second figure appeared in the doorway, another ghostly nun, this one fully clothed in tattered black habit. Her face, pale and hollow, stared at them, mouth opening in a silent scream. And then, impossibly fast, she was gone, leaving only a lingering cold that seemed to freeze the blood in their veins. The Warrens moved cautiously, trying to stay together, but the house had other plans. Doors slammed shut around them with tremendous force, trapping them in a narrow corridor. The lights flickered violently, throwing monstrous shadows across the walls, making every corner seem alive with unseen predators. Then came the whisper, soft, low, almost intimate. "You should not have come here. You cannot leave." It was everywhere at once inside their heads, reverberating in the walls, carried by the air they breathed. Lorraine could feel her heart racing uncontrollably, a pounding drumbeat that matched the rhythm of the house itself. From the far end of the corridor, a faint glow appeared, drawn by a mix of fear and duty. Ed and Lorraine cautiously approached. There, in the center of a long, dust-covered room, floated the ghost of the pregnant nun. Her eyes' endless black pits locked onto them. She raised a hand slowly, and the room seemed to distort around her, the air bending as if reality itself were being rewritten. Lorraine whispered prayers under her breath, shaking uncontrollably. Ed sprinkled holy water in a wide arc. The nun recoiled for a moment, but then let out a soundless scream, and suddenly, the shadows all around them surged forward, swarming like a dark, living tide. The objects that had once merely fallen now flew with purpose. A chair smashed against the wall, a heavy candlestick slammed into the floor inches from their feet. A small table flipped over, scattering glass and debris. They were trapped in a storm of malevolent energy, the likes of which no human mind could fully comprehend. The house was not just a structure, it was a predator, and they were intruders in its domain. Then came the final, unholy sound of the night. A low, guttural laughter that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It echoed off the walls, sinking into their bones. The air was thick, almost solid with malevolence, and every instinct screamed at them to flee, but where could they go? The house had already begun to close in, to manipulate the very space around them. As part 4 draws to its terrifying close, Ed and Lorraine Warren stand frozen in the upstairs corridor, surrounded, outmatched, yet still resolute. The house has revealed a fraction of its full power. Shadows dance closer, cold seeps into their very souls. And in the deepest recesses of the building, unseen forces gather, preparing for the night's ultimate confrontation. One thing is certain: they are no longer just investigators. They are participants in a nightmare, a living horror that is as intelligent as it is merciless. Part 5. The night had reached its peak. The shadows, the whispers, the unseen forces all converged in the heart of the old Lindley Street house. Ed and Lorraine Warren were no longer merely visitors. They were trapped participants in a living nightmare. Every inch of the house pulsed with malevolence, and it seemed to feed on their fear, growing stronger with each passing second. As they cautiously stepped into the main hall, the air thickened so much it was almost impossible to breathe. A cold so intense it burned their lungs swept through the room. Candlelight flickered weakly, casting grotesque shadows that stretched and twisted, morphing into humanoid shapes that moved independently of any light source. Suddenly, the furniture erupted in chaos. Chairs and tables flew across the hall like missiles. A heavy wardrobe toppled, narrowly missing Ed, who barely ducked in time. Books, shattered glass, and old frames spun through the air, propelled by invisible hands. The walls vibrated as if the house itself were alive, exhaling a guttural growl that shook the floorboards beneath them. From above came a sound that curdled the blood, the hollow, rhythmic tapping of footsteps on the attic floor. Ed and Lorraine looked up, and for the first time, the full horror of the house's intelligence revealed itself. The ceiling above warped slightly, as if the building were a living being, breathing and bending to focus all its power on them. From the far corner emerged the White Lady. Her white gown floated as if in water, her face pale, expressionless, but her eyes were endless black voids, pulling at the very essence of their souls. She extended her hand toward them. The air between them grew dense, a physical force pressing against their chests, making each breath a struggle. Lorraine raised her voice in prayer, sprinkling holy water in a wide arc. The White Lady recoiled, hissing in a soundless, supernatural fury, but it was a feint. From the shadows came dozens of forms, faceless nuns, tall shadow figures, objects that moved with intention. They weren't random, they were coordinated, attacking, surrounding, forcing Ed and Lorraine toward the center of the hall. The temperature dropped so drastically that frost formed on the walls and the floor. Ed felt his limbs stiffen, his heart racing uncontrollably. Lorraine clutched his arm, her nails digging in painfully, but neither of them could look away from the terrifying figures that now filled every corner, their black eyes reflecting nothing but malice. And then came the whispering, louder than ever before, deafening in its intensity. "You will never leave. You belong to us. Forever." The air itself seemed to thicken, slowing time, making each heartbeat an eternity. The shadow entities converged on them, merging into a single monstrous mass. It swirled like a living storm, black and shapeless, yet full of intent, pulsing with rage. Ed raised his crucifix, his voice echoing with commands, and Lorraine repeated prayers over and over, the sound cutting through the supernatural din. There was a moment, a suspended instant, when everything froze. The shadows recoiled slightly, the air lightened just enough for them to gasp. Then the building seemed to convulse violently. Floors buckled, walls groaned, and from every corner came objects hurled with terrifying force. Ed and Lorraine were slammed backward, crashing into a wall, bruised and bleeding, yet still alive. The White Lady hovered above them, screaming in a voice that was more felt than heard, a scream that resonated in their bones. In a final act of desperation, Lorraine took Ed's hand, and together they advanced toward the front door, which had remained stubbornly locked for hours. As they approached, the shadows surged one last time, but their movement slowed, faltered. With a powerful, united prayer and a final sprinkle of holy water, the entities recoiled violently, shattering the illusions of the house. The door creaked open. They bolted outside into the night, gasping for air, hearts hammering, their bodies trembling uncontrollably. Behind them, the house seemed to sigh, an ancient, living presence returning to silence, as if disappointed at losing its prey, but clearly waiting, watching, always waiting. Ed looked at Lorraine. "We survived. But it's still here," he said, his voice low. "This house, it's not done." Lorraine nodded, staring back at the dark silhouette of the Lindley Street house. "And it never will be. Whatever lives in there, it's eternal." The wind carried faint whispers to their ears, almost a lullaby, almost a threat. "We see you, we always see you, and one day, you'll return." And with that, the Warrens walked away, forever marked by the horrors of the Fairfield house, an encounter that would haunt their dreams for the rest of their lives. Did you enjoy the story? Let us know in the comments. And if you liked it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to The Horror Dream. Want more stories like this? Subscribe to The Horror Dream, and we'll bring you more darkness, just for you. If you enjoy a little chill down your spine, stick around, like, share, and hit that subscribe button, right here on The Horror Dream. Your support keeps us going, so stay with us. Subscribe to The Horror Dream for more spine-tingling tales.